أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My dear respected brother Tamzid al-Islam, Sheikh Abdul Rasul Khan, who had to go because he hadn't eaten, subhanAllah. You guys think that the speakers have like some glamorous life? He's been running, speaking. And then I said to him, subhanAllah, and he's, mashallah, now a grandfather. And he still runs strong. And I said, Sheikh, did you eat dinner yet? He said, no. I said, please just like go now. But he said, no, he wanted to wait till he finished his dinner. So we ask Allah to preserve our scholars and to protect them, inshallah. Ameen. This topic, at the end of the day, a long day, if you will, is something very heavy. But I want you to bring it home for yourself. And I want to ask questions. I want you to be able to feel comfortable sort of, responding. I want you to be able to make this session your own. I want to begin by asking you, what is the difference? Who wants to tell us the difference between equality and equity? Talking about gender. So there's a concept called equality. There's a concept called equity, and we'll help each other out, right? It's a youth session, so everybody, inshallah, raise your hand, respond. Yes?
Everyone is treated the same in equality, but in equity, everyone is treated like they get what they need.
They get what they need. Okay? Who wants to build on that? So, yes. Okay. Anyone want to add to that? Yes.
Equality is when everybody is given the same treatment, and equity is when everybody is brought to the same level.
Okay. And how old are you? 12, mashallah. Who remembers being able to speak at a session when you were 12? It's in the water. Yeah, it's the chicken we're eating. Yes. Okay, so approximately the combination of the different answers. Equality, you understand. They're trying to make it equal. So for example, if there were people standing here, we could make them equal according to height, and you would see the obvious. But equity focuses on the contribution each person makes. So there's not a comparison. For example, Islam is a very natural religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as male and female. And the ability to actually have a family, there is no way, no matter what any man says and wants to do, could he ever give birth. So could we say, well, it's not equal, it's not fair. Well, the equitable contribution of that is that the mother is the one blessed with what is called the raham, or the womb. So when we're going to talk about this today, I want you to keep in mind, where are your ideas coming from? What is the root of your understanding? And when you think about gender roles and equitable roles, how often do you go back to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And how often is it that you are trained or socialized by what's around you? Begin. I want to help you understand that Islam is the most natural religion there is, has ever been, and there will ever be. What do you think I mean by that when I say Islam is the most natural religion? And if somebody, by the way, wants to learn more about that, Brother Abdul Hamid Wahid from England actually wrote a book. It should be available on Amazon or anywhere else you shop, called Islam, the Natural Religion. What do you think I mean when I say Islam is the most natural religion? Yes? It's something that should come to everyone naturally. So this concept would be what the Prophet ﷺ taught us to be fitrah. Fitrah, he said, was that regardless of when or where or under what circumstances a child was born, that child has a natural inclination to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except if the parents themselves socialized the child and then he listed them to be Christian or Jew or Zoroastrianism and so forth. So that's one answer. What's another answer? That Islam is a natural religion. Yes?
Because Islam has been preserved so strongly, it's more immune to unnatural effects. Like for example, in today's society, because society is so backwards, Islam stayed natural, and now we're seen as strange and backwards in this unnatural society.
Yeah. So from fitra, we go to ghuraba. And the Prophet ﷺ said that Islam is a strange religion, where Muslims, if you will, in the sense that will be treated strangely, and glad tidings to the ghuraba, glad tidings to those who appear to be strange. There he is talking about the idea that what we assume to be natural is looked upon from society as unnatural, and then we're trying to say basically and stick to the path in that way. But I have something else that I'm thinking of, and I want to see who else is thinking in that direction, and then we'll come back to it. Islam is the most natural religion, the most natural way of life. What do we mean? There's a sister in the back. Yes. Okay, so if somebody closer to her heard her, can amplify, because it was very difficult for me to hear it. So can somebody of the brothers who heard what she said, can amplify it? The brothers are like, we don't listen to sisters. We're too modest. MashaAllah is right. Sister, can you somehow try to say it louder, or? Okay. Anyone want to add to that? Yes. Of common sense. Okay, another way to say it, right? So there is nothing that I find at a human level, when I think about it, that Islam in itself ever made unnatural. If you think about this, emotions. Does the Quran mention anxiety, fear, some sort of sadness? Does the Quran mention that? وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Consistently throughout the Quran says it's a natural part of your life to be afraid, to be anxious, to be saddened. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala associates that with doing righteous deeds, spending in the path of Allah. If you do those things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ensure that you will not experience anxiety, nor grief, nor fear. So emotions are natural, but emotions must be controlled. You follow what I'm saying? Emotions are natural, but they must be controlled. For example, when someone passes away, the Prophet ﷺ taught us by his example. Many people passed away in his life, but the one that is documented, where there was an interaction that took place, which showed us the natural nature of the religion, was that his son, the infant son Ibrahim, passes away, and the Prophet ﷺ has to bury his own son, one son, and he cries, he sheds tears. And the companions say, what is this? Because they thought shedding tears is saying that you are ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are not accepting the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alayhi salatu wasalam taught us it is a natural part. So he said three things about controlling your grief, controlling your sadness. He said, the eyes shed tears, the heart grieves, but the tongue never says anything displeasing to Allah. What is the most common thing that people would say is, why me? If a parent passes away from cancer, from a car accident, someone in your family dies suddenly, or with a disease, you say, why me? Why us? Then you are questioning the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very natural to feel sadness, to feel joy and happiness, to feel, in fact, despair, but then containment and control. Similarly, because this is a session about gender interactions and dynamics and equity, we have to talk about the fact that the one who created us, who gave us a user manual in terms of the Quran and then a walking example, because many of us putting things together look at the user manual, but we never know quite how to do it right, so you have to watch a YouTube video where someone actually does what we are trying to do. It's human nature. It's better to follow an example. Alayhi salatu wasalam came at a time when not only were women completely devoid of rights, not only was it possible for a man to completely abuse a woman, to oppress her, to give her zero rights, but it was even worse. It was associated that a man who had stature, a macho man, if you got news, the Quran documents this, if you got news of the birth of a daughter, the Quran says what? His face blackened, meaning got sad. I got a daughter? Because it was considered a sign of weakness, that a daughter would bring nothing, but the son would help me to continue my name, my progeny. I would be able to go on and continue having the Husain. I'm a Husain. So the Husains would continue. The daughter would ultimately have nothing and no rights. The Quran came to uplift women out of that, literal existence of hell, if you will, where they had zero rights, fully oppressed, taken advantage of. The Quran comes and says, no. In fact, not only are you going to be created as male and female, we will always, Surah Al-Imran, verse 195 was recited at the beginning of the program. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to them, and their Lord accepted of them and answered them, never will I suffer to be lost the work of you, whether it be a male or a female, whether the worship, the acts of worship. So my worship as a man is not superior to the worship of a woman. My fasting as a man is not superior to the worship of a woman. So there you have a woman and a man racing towards Jannah, racing towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, racing to do good, knowing what? That I will only be judged by the quality of my worship. That there may be weakness in my salah because of a lack of khushu', because I'm literally playing video games until the time of iqamah, and then I think I have so much control that I could just come, say Allahu Akbar, and not have the soundtrack of the video game going through my head. That will be recognized. Not because I am a man or because I'm a woman, because of my khushu', my level of concentration, my fasting, and on and on and on. You can go to Surah number 4, 124, Surah number 33, verse 35. All of them start to show you what is equity in the religion. So where does the problem come from? If it is that Allah already said that a man and a woman will be treated equitably and their worship will be accepted equally, except for the quality of the acts of worship. Where does it come from? Again, it goes back to what Sheikh Abdul Rahman just talked about. It goes back to culture. It goes back to the idea that maybe we never took time to learn from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, who modeled it for us. We were lazy, intellectually lazy, and we just followed what I saw happening in front of me. So if my father, if my grandfather, if my uncle, all of the male relatives consistently treated women in my surrounding, in my environment, in my family, as a creature or a creation subservient to the male, I internalize that and I begin to speak that way to women, about women, and about them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He had a wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, who was infinitely more wealthy at the time of the marriage than most women of that time. She sent for a proposal to him because she admired his character. He was an upright man, and not once had there ever been a report that he had been immodest, he had ever treated a woman in a harsh way, he had ever had interactions in an immodest way with a woman. He had all of that going for him. So when she sends the proposal, he marries her. He's sending the signal that even before he knew about prophethood, that I am a man who can testify that a righteous woman, a wealthy woman, a woman who is able to literally be the mother of my children, I will do anything for her and I will love her until her death and beyond. Which is why even after her death, he could not stop mentioning her because of the beautiful character that she had. She was not a prophet. He was the prophet. She was his wife. She was the mother of his daughters. She was the mother of his daughters, ultimately, who one of them is Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. And let me address that a little bit. How did he show equity? How did he welcome his daughter? He would be sitting in gatherings. You know and I know that we have a culture in which we say women should not be seen or heard. Of course, there's a time and a place for interaction among family members. But if there are guests of another household, what should happen to the women? They should sit with the men, the men of the family, but in a modest way. In a way that is not offensive or dishonorable to either gender. The men cannot behave in a flirtatious way with other women while their wives and mothers and grandmothers are sitting there. Neither should the women do that. But back in those days, back when he was the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would sit in gatherings of men. His beloved daughter, Fatima az-Zahra, radiallahu ta'ala anha, walks into that gathering to see her father. In an environment before, he might have said, please, men are talking here, or men are gathering here. No, he knows his daughter. One of the most modest examples of modesty. So he welcomes her to the gathering. He welcomes her to the gathering. He then rises to receive her. He moves from the seat in which he was seated. And he says to her, you sit here. The honor that he gives her puts to shame every single man in that gathering. Why? Because they can never imagine ever giving the women that level of equitable treatment. And that's why his esteem rises in the hearts of honorable men, because they say, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. That's how I'm going to treat my wife, my children, my daughter, my aunt, my grandmother. If you think about where we are at a time when imitating the values of the society in which we live is where things are rising in such a way that we can't even recognize each other anymore. We cannot be imitating a society and a culture and values that are not aligned with the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So equitable contributions. Equity comes from contributions. So how did he do it? If I had to ask you, and subhanAllah, one of my teachers used to do this, where if you're sitting enough whereby if you raise your hand, nobody will know. So he would have everyone close their eyes. And then for the answer to the question, just to keep confidentiality, he would say, keep your eyes closed and then raise your hand where nobody else knows that you answered yes or no. If I had to ask you, is housework, work around the house, cooking, cleaning, everything around the house, how did it become the domain of women? The question would be, because of how I saw my family do it, that's how I felt it should be done, and I don't know what the answer would be. I'll just leave it at that. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was asked about her husband. Most surveys, when they ask about couples, husbands and wives and all these different confidential questionnaires, you're supposed to try to get the most real answer. She's the wife of the beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Has observed him almost since childhood because her own father is his best friend. When asked about how he spent his time, she said, "Kana fi mahnati aw khidmati ahlihi." That he was in the service, the mahna, the khidmah of his family. Which means, and they said, he was helping around the house. He was saying, I am not going to say, I am the Prophet of Allah. Do you know who I am? I'm not going to lift a finger in this house. I work so hard. I'm out there, teaching people about the religion, receiving delegations day and night. Some people are cursing at me and fighting me and about to kill me. I'm not going to lift a finger. He lifts a finger. He serves his family. He does what is needed around the house until the call to prayer is made, because he is the imam of the community and his home is attached to the masjid, at least in Medina. Are you following what I'm saying? This change is not going to come. If another Munna convention comes and goes, we listen to lectures, nothing actually changes. And I am never ever going to say to you that which I myself don't push myself to do. Equity in this religion, equity in this life means that we have to be able to allow our sisters, our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts to have the same level of access to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of access to learning about the religion, of access to practicing the religion. I travel, I serve the community, that's what we're called to do. I teach in the daytime, I'm a professor. I can serve my family at night. I do the laundry of the family. I do the ironing of the family. I clean the bathrooms of our home. I don't say that to you in some boasting way, but I'm hoping that it will reach the hearts of one of you who is a young person and say, when I grow up, when I get married, when I'm in a family situation, I will do not what Altaf did. I will do what the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. If we transform the landscape of America through loving our religion, through following and loving the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I am telling you without a shadow of a doubt that more people will at least be sympathetic to our faith and not fight us and attack us. And if Allah guides them, they may even say, I want to be a part of that religion. I want to be a part of that community. And as I start to close, before Islam, as I mentioned to you, equity was not a question. Equality didn't exist. Islam came and said, you as a woman, if your father gives you wealth and property and you get married, you do not give up your property to anybody, you keep your property. When you get married, you are entitled to a wedding gift from the man who comes to marry you. And it can range. It can range. For one of them, it was the Shahada itself. To enter into Islam was the gift. For one of them, it was the Quran, teaching the Quran. And on and on and on until whatever else you take it to as she asks for the gift. After marriage, she doesn't have to lift a finger to take care of the family. She has to be provided for. And if she does lift a finger for the sake of the family, every single moment of service is sadaqah in heaviest scales, heaviness of the scales on the day of judgment. If she works or has her own wealth, she doesn't have to spend a single penny for the family. If she spends even a single penny on the family, it is a source of sadaqah for her, and her scale is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. She doesn't have to change her name after marriage. That was a British property law that we inherited. Because how I basically named you happened with, why is Malcolm X, Allah yarhamhu, named Malcolm X? He said, I don't know the last name of my people. I don't know the tribe until he tried to discover where they came from. So he was an X. Why? Because I am not somebody's property. And they used to say, you are now part of our estate. You are an enslaved on our plantation. You are a Worthy, a Richardson, a whatever last name. A woman keeps the lineage of her family. She keeps her name to show the lineage from which she came. She doesn't become somebody else's property. She's not treated in that way. How far did we come? From a point when a baby used to be buried alive, infant daughter buried alive. And the Quran says that infant daughter will be asked, بِأَيِّ دَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ, for what reason were you killed? For what reason were you killed other than the fact that you were a girl born to a family that felt ashamed? You think that's a thing of the past? In this day in India, in this day in China, and also in other parts, not as much talked about, there is infanticide. Because they say the girl, because they treat mahar and dowry the other way, where the girl's family has to give a gift to the man. They say she will be an expense to us. The boy will be the one to bring wealth. He will be able to work for the family. He'll be able to demand a high dowry from his future wife's family. It still happens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took us from those days of Jahiliyyah into light. He gave us the actual meaning of equitable contributions, of equity within the religion, literally within practice. And in the last couple of minutes, how do you do this practically? Start to look around. How often are you in the shopping, in the grocery stores, actually carrying those heavy groceries? How often is it the women of our families? How often are you even caring about how the laundry is getting done? Who is cleaning the bathrooms? Who is picking up after us? Dr. Jamal Badawi, Hafidahullah, told us once in a lecture, he said, after dinner, the first thing he does is goes to the sink and rubs off all of the food off of the plates so that before it is put or left, it doesn't get dried up and it's harder to scrub. Do you have that level of situational awareness? Do you understand how difficult Ramadan is for the women in our community, in our families? Do you understand what it means when dad gets excited and invites 10 people, 10 families over, and the women of the family struggle, break their backs, and still have to wake up to fast? Still have to attempt to do tarawih on their own. Still have to attempt to do any kind of qiyam on their own, and still have to fast during the day while cooking all day. How will that change with you? It will change when you say, how is it that I'm a part of a religion where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not force his wives, did not force his household to provide for him? Sometimes they said there was not smoke seen from his home for 3 months at a time. Smoke in those days meant no warm food was being cooked. No warm food was being cooked. What is warm in those days? It was meat. Our Prophet did not have meat for 3 months at a time. They lived on the two black things they said, which is water and dates. So where do we get off saying, how come we're eating, chicken 3 days in a row? How come you went to a dawat or a party and say, oh, I can't believe on the way back they only had, beef. They didn't have goat or salmon or this or that. Who are you? Are you following the religion that we're following? Are you part of this same faith? Do you understand that if we don't do it with this generation, another generation in America will carry the same baggage that belongs nowhere in our religion, belongs everywhere outside of the religion. So let us bring that, inshallah, to our hearts. Let's take that message, and believe me, I become like this, more animated about this, because I grew up with 3 sisters and a mother, and I'll close there, and a mother and a father. A mother who at the age, and I have the document because I'm preserving it, at the age of around 12, was removed from school. Her father went and signed an actual document to say, my daughter is now of the age of maturity. She's being removed from education to be prepared essentially because of parda, their interpretations of parda, and to be prepared for marriage essentially. A mother who never finished middle school, if you will, went on to give birth to 3 daughters and a son. Minimally, each of them has a master's degree, one of them a PhD, married to a PhD, and she, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, is more knowledgeable, more intelligent, more wise than all of us with our degrees combined. You have that in your homes. You have that potential in your sisters, in your mothers, in your grandmothers, in your aunts. Let us do that. Let us inshallah, reaffirm our commitment to this equity that our religion gives us. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.